I think. The second part is chaired by Jana and includes presentations by Anselmo Edwanda Quiroz, myself, Georges Jean Pinot, and Julieta Rotaru. Each presenter has about 5 minutes for presenting a summary of the major points of the presentation. At the end of each part, there will be a discussion session talking about the papers of that session. I hope that is agreeable, and we'll start now with session part 1, and starting with Professor Cohen as the first presenter.
Thank you, and it's wonderful to see you. I just wish it had been in person, but next time, perhaps. My paper analyzes the intricate relationship of the Bhagavad Gita to some of the Upanishads formerly affiliated with the Black Yajurveda, the Katha Upanishad, Shvetashvatara Upanishad, and Maitri Upanishad. And I try to demonstrate that these 4 texts are linked together in a complex network of mutual references and quotations, as well as shared ideas. The paper demonstrates that both the emerging Proto-Sankhya and Yoga philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita and the text's theism must be understood in the context of the text's interrelationship to the Black Yajurveda school. While scholars have long been aware of the close relationship between the Bhagavad Gita and certain of the older Upanishads, my paper demonstrates that the Bhagavad Gita has textual affinities to the Upanishads of the Black Yajurveda in particular, and that these affinities help explain some of the significant theological developments in the Bhagavad Gita. So in my paper, I analyze the close textual relationship between the Bhagavad Gita and the Katha, Shvetashvatara, and Maitri Upanishads, both in terms of shared stanzas and verse lines, imagery, and ideas. Both the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads of the Black Yajurveda contain many technical terms and ideas that later come to be associated with Sankhya and Yoga philosophy. I discussed the various depictions of Purusha in the 4 texts, and I note that the term Prakriti is used in the sense of the model or paradigm of the sacrifice in some of the late Vedic texts of the Black Yajurveda Shastra. The related adjective prakrta is also used frequently in the ritual texts of the Black Yajurveda to designate something that is original, natural, and paradigmatic. It is likely, therefore, that the philosophical usage of prakriti as cosmic nature, a principle contrasted with Purusha in the Black Yajurveda Upanishads and in the Bhagavad Gita, may have grown out of this ritual usage. Yajurveda presents the world as a cosmic sacrifice, and the later texts affiliated with this Veda still resonate with the central metaphor. I argue that Prakriti in the Upanishads, modeled on the pattern of the cosmic sacrifice, here represents the paradigmatic unfolding or patterning. Along with a cluster of Proto-Sankhya Yoga terms and ideas in these texts, it is also worth noting that the parable of the chariot, most well known from Katha Upanishad 3.3 through 3.8, is also echoed in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad and the Maitri Upanishad. It is particularly intriguing, therefore, that a charioteer is featured so prominently in the Bhagavad Gita, and it's even possible, I suggest, to read the entire Bhagavad Gita as an extension of the Upanishadic parable of the chariot, with Krishna taking the role of the manas or buddhi, helping the Atman, represented by Arjuna, control the senses and the body and set a steady course. I further show that we can trace an emerging theism through the texts affiliated with the Black Yajurveda, from the early hints of Vishnu's status as supreme deity and his mystical identification with the worshipper in the Taittiriya Samhita, to subtle hints of a theistic notion of Atman in the Katha Upanishad, via the more developed theism of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, culminating in the Bhagavad Gita's vision of Krishna as the highest deity and the path to salvation. What new light does its affiliation with the Black Yajurveda Upanishads shed on the Bhagavad Gita? First of all, it demonstrates that the ideas of the Bhagavad Gita, including its articulation of bhakti as a path to salvation, and its early Sankhya and Yoga philosophy did not arise in a vacuum, but was part of a larger collaborative intellectual endeavor. In fact, the close interrelationship between the Bhagavad Gita and the Black Yajurveda Upanishads suggests that the category of ritual expert and epic bard may not have been mutually exclusive. Furthermore, the connections between these texts suggests that even the ideas that at first sight may seem new and radical in the Bhagavad Gita are grounded in the Vedic tradition. Its bhakti is foreshadowed in the ritual texts of the Black Yajurveda, where the sacrificer strives to become one with Vishnu, its prakriti in the notion of a paradigmatic ritual sacrifice and its transmutations, and its tattvas in the sacrificial enumerations of the parts that make up the world. In short, I attempt in this paper to demonstrate that the Bhagavad Gita is closely conceptually tied to the Upanishads of the Black Yajurveda and likely grew out of the same intellectual environment. Thank you very much.
All right. So the next speaker on the list, I think, is Cezary Galevich. He's not here yet. So let me check my outline here, who comes next. So yeah, Joanna Jurevich is our next speaker then.
That's all right.
Yeah.
So the title of my paper is Why Indra is the Kindler, Indra. Indra and the supernatural cognition in the Veda, and it was I was fascinated by the problem why the name of Indra appears in later Vedic texts like Shatapatha Brahmana or Aitareya Upanishad or Chandogya Upanishad in the context of supernatural cognition, of transformation, mental transformation. I give two examples of this fact. First one is in the Shatapatha Brahmana, where so-called etymology of Indra is Indra, the kindler, which kindles breaths, which allow Prajapati finally reality to manifest itself. And another one comes from the Aitareya Upanishad, where the Indra is the real name of Indra is Idandra, which comes from idam adarsham, and this is what has been said by this is the speech of the self, Atman, born in a human being who looks around and sees that everything is Brahman and says, this idam I have adarsham. But so he is cryptically called, even though he is Idandra, as Oliver translates it, people cryptically call him Indra because gods somehow love the cryptic. And then I propose somehow in the same vein as I'm not sure how to pronounce your names. Signe. I'm sorry. So in the same that we should go back to understand some phenomena which appear later, and I propose to go back to the Rig Veda and to the motive of Indra's fight with Vitra as describing not only the social transformations and cosmic transformations, for example, as Waitaka proposes it and many other people, but also as describing or expressing supernatural cognition gained thanks to Soma, which we are told explicitly that Indra drinks Soma, grows and then kills Vitra and releases waters, but waters are we can be treated more generally as appearance of light and of space, because waters need space to move. And within the frames of this conceptualization, Vitra could be a model or symbol of the mental state before somic cognition begins. And then I analyze one hymn, which was also analyzed by Whitaker in his book. Let me find the title, because sorry, it is. In his book, this about masculinity and Indra and so on. I'm sorry, I cannot find the title now, but I have I have referred to it more properly in my presentation. This is the hymn, late hymn 10-153, very short hymn, which describes in a very elliptic way, I would say, evokes the model of, or the idea of Indra who kills Vitra. And I am doing just analysis of the context of the words which are used in this hymn, the context, the wider Vedic context, which allow me to this analysis allows me to show that this hymn also describes supernatural cognition. I will give you just one of Indra. I will give you just one example. It is in stanza 4th. We are told that Indra sharpens his arka vajram. Yes, this is like, let me quote it. I will quote it immediately in one moment. Tvam Indra sajoshasam arkam vibhashi bahvoch vajram shishana ojasa. So arka and vajra are direct object of the participle shishana. And in the Rig Veda, the concept of sharpening a metal was used to express somic cognition, or cognition which is appeared under the influence of Soma, and Soma is identified with Vajra in the Rig Veda. And this metaphor is very clearly seen in another late hymn, 10-108, where seers who come after Sayana are called, they are Somashita, so sharpened by Soma. And what is the difference between so my point is that I give more example about sharpening and other things connected with the hymn and with the words used in the hymn, but my point is that Indra was, as we all know, very important symbol or metaphor for the small, for perfect realization of somic exaltation and action undertaken under its influence. And as Schmidt and then Whitaker and Mani have shown, Indra is, we could call him, prototypical sacrificer with whom a human sacrificer identifies during sacrifice. So my interpretation of Indra's fight with Vitra explains how Soma could play, as Whitaker says, its fundamental role of fusing divine and human realms at ritual, because Indra was seen as, could be seen, maybe I should say, as the factor of supernatural cognition. And it is possible that somehow the poets identified themselves with Indra and felt as if Indra appeared inside them as the main factor of cognition, and with which the poets identified themselves as those who perform supernatural cognition conceived in terms of killing Vitra and experiencing creation of everything. And this is expressed in, I'm just about to finish. And it is worth noting that in stanza 4, where Indra sharpens his Vajra and Arka, song and light, Arka is qualified as Sajoshas, so associated together, united being or acting in harmony with, because the song, which is in fact manifestation of Soma, and seen as Vajra, is created together. It is created by Indra and sacrificer or sacrificers together. And finally, what is important to say, that we all know that in the times of the Brahmanas, Soma was lost, but its role was memorized because the texts were memorized. So memory of influence of Soma remained and was refreshed every time when texts were recited. And the descriptions, for example, of Prajapati, who toils and heats himself, are similar to the Rigvedic descriptions of the first influence of Soma, which is heating. Soma inflames the sacrificer. So, and I would say that these descriptions of Prajapati reflect the attempts to get the supernatural mental transformations without Soma, but preserving the main physical symptoms of its influence, and of course connection of Indra with supernatural cognition. And in the older Upanishads, in time of the older Upanishads, the ways of getting supernatural cognition did not involve heating, as it was used to be in the Brahmanas, but the concept of Indra as connected with mental transformation remained, as it is attested in, for example, Aitareya Upanishad or Chandogya Upanishad. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So our next speaker then is Katie Smith. I see that Professor Galevich is now present.
Yes, hello. Sorry for being late.
So we'll do Professor Galevich then first. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you, and sorry for being late.
Please, just before you start, please make sure to keep to 5 minutes. We are already running over time.
I know. So for those of you who had a chance of going through this intricate system of this conference and look at my presentation in the form of a video, you know already that my topic is rather marginally connected to the Vedic studies per se, but I couldn't help the privilege and the pleasure of presenting it to Vedicists, though it does not concern Vedic textuality as it is, but it concerns something that I myself, while doing some sort of Vedic studies, namely the historical circumstances of historically, geographically, and regionally located Vedic culture, namely a tangible community of Vedic reciters. That's why the topic of my title, that's why the title, The Veda and the Patronage Economy of the Hindu Temple. And this is the Kerala experience, of course. And it is connected with a relatively recent find in terms of a quite, on the one hand, cryptic, on the other hand, very rich piece of local Malayalam, but heavily Sanskritized literature of an autobiographical character. It has been found sometime in the middle 60s and then edited by N.M. Nambutiri, who is no more, in 1981, and re-edited again by a local historian, V.V. Haridas. But that does not mean that the work is easy to read and easy to understand, but what is perhaps interesting for those who have some studies is that it is a Vedic community which has been presented in a specific type of discourse. Examples a report, and actually we know from the diction of this literary piece that it incorporates and within a text, and in this last resort, is a written report on the so-called Varam ritual, which is a ritual recitation positioned, localized in a specific temple, and you are given the name of the temple, the locality, the name of the people, the name of the adversaries, the name of the local ruler, and all of that is set in a conflict between the political power and Brahmana group, and one of them, through development of got stigmatized and degraded from its Brahmanic status, and this starts. This is triggered on the stage of this Varam. In Malayalam means a time or an occasion. It's a timely expression through an act of desacralizing one of the reciters by pulling the end of his mundu, and this triggers a series of events through which the whole community loses its status of full-fledged Brahmana, thing which is over there in Kerala called with a Malayalam name like Musattu, symbolizing something like a half Brahman. And these results in losing the right of studying and reciting the Veda and teaching the Veda, which with the means of subsistence, and has repercussions and consequences for a few centuries ahead, and it is ethnographically attested from that the community still somehow fights with its rights for the Vedic status, including Vedic ritualism. Thank you.
Thank you. So now to Dr. Katie Smith.
Thank you. I think I can be pretty brief. I will only say that the abstract for my talk is radically different than the actual recorded talk itself, and that has something to do with the failure to update it and deciding to go in a slightly different direction. But I said something very, very basic in the talk, which is that if we examine the depictions of how the Vedic texts sort of conceive of themselves in the earliest Vedic materials, we can see that there are variations, but there's a consistent and strong theme. Let's see, I think there were maybe like 5 axes that I looked at. Of course, one is the Panchajana, which is sort of the notion that the Vedic people see themselves as distributed likely through 5 directions of space, north, south, east, west, and the center, which is also elevated up. So there's a geospatial orientation of center as political power and periphery as political marginality. There's a gender dimension. So you can think of, when Indra takes control of the 7 streams, the streams are in the feminine. So there's this sort of masculinity as political power, femininity as marginalized. There's a model of the totality of the society as the host relationships. And then it's closely related to this, but different, the idea of a society as a bunch of agonistic society, like a battle. We come together at these festivals at the Veda, and what we do is we fight, we struggle, and we're competitors, and some win and some lose. And the most interesting one to me is the body of God as defining the political arrangement of this alliance. So the poets want to be inside Varna, they want to be inside Indra. Outside the body of the god is a dangerous place. We want to be, So those are sort of the main axes that I looked at, and I think that not all depictions of society, writ large, fulfills each one of these conditions, but many of them do, and we can sort of look at different depictions as engaged in multiple ones of these. So if we look at, for example, the horse sacrifice, you can easily see the gender dynamic of masculine centrality of the horse and these 4 women. What I argued also in this talk was that those 4 women represent clans, and what we have is a mapping of the dominance of the Yajamana, the patron of the horse sacrifice, over the other over the other clans, and this seems to be a little bit different than other like horse sacrifices that have been hypothesized out of the materials. For example, the Mahanagni hymns in the Rig Veda Kirlani. I don't think I talked about that, but the Etacha Pralapa, where people say, oh, you know, it's been argued, maybe this is like a horse sacrifice, but in this case we have one feminine entity. So what we have there is a model of society that's fivefold, like the Panchajana, 4 women plus 1 horse. It's got a gender distinction, masculinity is elevated over femininity, and we've also got, I mean, we could argue that there's like a body of God element there, but I don't want to go into that. The other thing that I thought was particularly interesting was looking at Prajapati, and when his 5 core components struggle or in an agonistic combat, we can see that this sort of philosophical idea of, you know, sight, breathing, hearing, and so on, in competition to see who's the real Brahman or who's the real Ukta, or whatever. We can see that as directly coming out of models of a 5-part social milieu in which there's agonism, but they exist within a political coalition that is mapped to the hollow body of a god. In this case, Prajapati. The same deal for the Purusha Sukta, where we don't see 4, you see the 4 Varnas and you say, oh, look, those are 4 people. But if you include the Purusha, you have guest-host relationships. The Purusha is the 5th person, hosts the other 4. The Purusha is supreme over the other 4, so we have a 5-fold model. You have the Purusha's relationship to Viraj. There, it's actually somewhat disrupted because it's not really clear if the Purusha is really supreme over Viraj. And I could make some comments there, but I think I think that would take too much time. So there we have a guest host 5-fold model, also inside the body of God. So I guess what I want to push at is people see something like the Purusha Sukta and they say, wow, this is a really new hymn. Maybe there's a new social institution. And I don't see that at all. I see it as that and the later Brahmana passages about Prajapati and his faculties in competition as essentially in the same visual and iconic language of other depictions of the social totality that we see in the Rig Veda. That is all. I hope that wasn't 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And so the last talk in this section is Professor Janševskaya. Please present your summary.
Thank you. So my paper is the functions of Rita in the Rig Veda. Rita as cosmic order or truth. And I start by providing an etymology. It's a protein root. Well, hair with the laryngeals to connect, to build, to order, to fit together. And then I provide certain cognates for this word, such as an important as an opportune or a good moment, and a unit of time. Then I proceed by analyzing actually the functions of and giving examples as I go. I won't give example here. So the functions of Rita, analyze them. First, creates the universe, or rather the gods create the universe by means of Rita. Then proceeding, I also show one of the creation hymns from the 10th mandal of the Rig Veda, where Rita appears, and after that, the whole process of creation begins. So Rita is a crucial instrument in creation of the universe. Then other motifs or other functions of Rita is that Rita regulates natural phenomena such as celestial bodies, rivers, rain, waters, and so on. And everything. It also regulates the sacrifice. Then I also, well, it's in the Asya Vamasya hymn, I juxtapose the wheel of Rita with the wheel of the year. So Rita is basically equal to the year, which puts it into the temporal domain. Also, the final functions I analyze for the Rig Veda is that is, and that is slightly marginal in the Rig Veda, but still there is a motif that Rita is sort of a rules or code of conduct and truth that can be followed by humans, including Vedic poets. Then I analyze all functions of Rita, functions as they are represented as follows. It arranges and regulates all natural phenomena, the gods, the living beings. It establishes that it functions as cosmic order and also absolute undivided time eternity, being with the two as well. Second function, it acts as truth, spoken truth, and truth as reality, and the gods follow and embody it. And finally, it sets the moral or religious codes or rules by which humans must abide. Those who transgress it are punished, those who follow it are rewarded. Then, after the Veda, Rita disappears pretty much as a notion that defines this cosmic order. The Harva Veda, Shaunaka, the Kala Sukta. And there I also find that time in the Kala Sukta function as Rita in cosmic order. Universe, and in the Rig Veda we also see together created. It's a necessary power for creation. Then time in the Kala Sukta also arranges and regulates all natural phenomena, all the living being. Well, in the Rig Veda, Rita does pretty much the same. Finally, I say that in that time has two forms, transitory and divided, and permanent time eternity. In the Rig Veda, Rita represents this time eternity, and then there's this temporality represented by Ritu. So that after that, I go to discuss what in late times, epic times. Basically, I discussed the doctrine of Kalavada. That basically time has the same functions as Rita, as cosmic order in the Rig Veda. So it's the principal form that creates, sustains, and destroys the universe. It's the highest deity. It arranges everything, regulates everything. But then also a system of cosmic cycles is introduced in the epic period. And then time destroys the universe at the end of cosmic cycle. Time's nature is also dualistic, and it has this and transit. That's one thing. After that, I has the notion of dharma in Hinduism. And dharma, stemming from Vedic dharma, compare etymology of dharma with the etymology of Rita, is similar. Dharma and Rita have similar meaning, something that can hold something together, a holder of some kinds. Then I go to analyze dharma in Hinduism and, well, find out it's not social cosmic order actually, but really it's social. There's no cosmic aspects. The only moment when cosmic aspects appear actually is when dharma, through the connection of dharma with the system of cosmic, all this meaningful and religious duty, whereas time possesses different functions which cosmic order. So in my paper is that after the Rig Veda, the functions of Rita are divided. We cannot say that dharma is something which substitutes Rita in the Hindu times. We can say that the functions of Rita were divided between Kala in Kalavada, in that Harva Veda, and the functions of dharma, which represents the moral code of duty. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have about 15 minutes for discussion of this part of the section. Who would like to start? Not everybody at once, please.
Hello. Hello. Do
Hello.
you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yeah, right.
Okay. No, but no, I'm sorry to have been late, to have joined late. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, fine.
We do.
So, hello, everybody. So, no, I want just to make sure something, you see, that is about organization. So I feel sorry to have joined this session with some delay, but
Yeah.
I am supposed to speak or to give my presentation.
Yes.
Yes?
Since you came in late, let me explain. We divided up the session into two.
Okay.
And you'll be in the second session, which is also
fine,
where
fine.
I will
Thank you
be.
very much. So I have just a little question about Rita, leaving aside the etymological problem. You see how this idea that Rita means basically order can be complies with the fact that in Avestan, Asha, which is likely related, etymologically related with it, Rita, means truth. You see, and in Jamison and Brereton Veda translation, Rita is systematically translated by truth. So that you see, that it's not just a question of translation, actually, but it's a question of interpretation of the Indo-Iranian religion. Okay, but I know it's a very big problem, but sorry. Okay.
Well, may I those first of all, I think Luders actually, when proposing the meaning of truth for the translation of Rita, obviously he was influenced by the materials, and
Yes.
of course, well, this word is translated impossible, really. So, but I believe that the two meanings, they do not contradict each other. That we should something like active truth. So basically, as cosmic matter, as a representation of this truth actively. So I don't see any contradiction.
Okay, fine. But I agree, Natalia, I agree totally with you that Dharma is a successor of Rita, see, so to speak. See, Dharma.
Yeah, substitute of some functions of Rita. That's what I.
Yes. Okay. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes?
Me too.
Kelly?
was
Kelly,
first.
yes, was first.
Signa, I had a question for Joanna, if I could.
Okay.
For Signa, my question is, if I was going to ask if she had a hunch, if there was a particular shaka, or if there's a particular branch of the Black Yajurveda that she thought the Bhagavad Gita might more properly belong to, or if we were to see it as some sort of blend. Because I know that, when we look at who's in charge, what kind of Black Yajurvedans are involved in, like, the Dharma project. We have Apastamba Dharma Sutra, we've got Advaita Dharma Sutra. It's been argued that Kumar was a Taittiriya. So there's lots of Taittiriya stuff going on there. And I wondered if you felt like there was one particular Black Yajurvedic Upanishad that was more closely connected than the others. Yeah, I have another question, but I'll keep it.
Sorry. Yes, that's a great question. And yes, I do think that the Bhagavad Gita is much more closely related to both textually and conceptually in terms of borrowed material and in terms of ideas to the Katha Upanishad than the others. Then we have a also close but a little bit more distant relationship to the Shvetashvatara, and then an even more distant relationship to the Maitreya Upanishad. So it seems as if the mutual influence or borrowing from the same source or just being influenced by the same cultural milieu comes through much more strongly when we look at the Bhagavad Gita and the Katha Upanishad in particular.
Can I jump into this for a moment? I think in your presentation, Signe, you somehow lithographied in the second example, the passage from the Katha Upanishad. And had you gotten the real text, the corresponding to the Bhagavad Gita, then you could have seen that the second half of the verse is just exactly the same in both texts. So you can see that there's a strong textual relationship. Okay, we yield the floor back to Katie.
Okay, so I have a question for Anna, and I've looked at this passage, and it's a really interesting one because if I remember earlier, it started like talking about the world coming from Sat and Asat and Sat, right? So this being and non-being, then talks about the cosmic Purusha after a fashion, and then there's actually 7 so there's from Sat and Asat, there's like the Purusha, and then there's 7, and then Indra is the Inda. And I had seen it as a way of trying to reconcile or unify these sort of 3 different Rigvedic cosmogonies, right? That you have the Sat and Asat origin of the universe, you have the Purusha from which everything comes, and Indra and the 7 Angirases that go to Bala Cave. And I wondered if you thought that this particular the Brahmana passage might have provided an opportunity for like conceptual bleeding or blending of ideas, or if Indra as the Kindler, because I think they also say that these are like the breaths, right? They're 7 pranas. Or if Indra is gobbling up imagery from Agni and Apamnapat directly without any kind of intervention from these other cosmogonies.
I'm not sure if I understand your question.
Okay.
So could you put it slightly simpler?
Do you think the imagery here is primarily one of Indra taking on imagery from Agni and Apamnapat directly, or could vector for the conceptual blending come from what appears to be a combination of different origin myths that this Shatapatha Brahmana passage contains, because it's got Sat and Asat and the Purusha and the 7?
That's a very interesting question. I haven't thought about Apamnapat, but it is something. There is something of this image in the image of the Shatapatha Brahmana. This one Kindler who is shining or burning or whatever, and other breaths are, we don't know, but we can suppose that they surround Indra. So it could be somehow reflect the idea of Apamnapat, which was very, very, as you show also in your paper, maybe you didn't mention Apamnapat, but you mentioned this fivefold structure where the center is we almost, well, it is difficult not to think about the center as standing, which is surrounded by many others, yes? Maybe it was somehow influenced by this idea, and but also the conceptualization. For me, this passage and other passages, cosmogonic passages of the Shatapatha Brahmana, where Prajapati kills himself, heats himself, and then dies, and sometimes he is presented as a great race or whatever, and dies afterwards. It reflects more practice than mental ideas, I would say. So that they tried to become as heated as you were under the influence of Soma. But of course, it agrees also with Vedic ideas of one shining man, Vajra, it can, of course, it is, the Soma is called Vajra, and Soma is in the waters, in the nine mandala. So the image is also almost the same, and Indra is somehow identified with his Vajra too. So I think that it's a very interesting idea, and it can be somehow, we can look at this passage from this point of view.
Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more question. I think, Joanna, you had a question.
Yes, but I had 3 questions. Okay, so just very shortly.
Just ask one of them. Ask the most
Last one of
important
them.
one, please.
It's difficult to choose which one is most important. So I will, I will write to other speakers my questions. So, but let's stay with Kali. In the Atharva Veda, there is this, in Vratya Kanda, we have also this idea that there is one, because the Vratya is presented as running or going or falling into 4 directions. And he is of course surrounded and followed by other kinds of beings or anything, but it is also, I think, very close to this structure you presented. We have one male which goes into east and south and west, and then into the northern direction. Would you agree with this? Am I with this?
I think there's lots of tempting images that I could also add, and I think it could be valid. This, but also, I think it's been talked about the 5-fold Pandavas, for instance, as constituting the totality of, like, the Kuru, the Kuru. Well, not exactly the Kuru polity, but the importance, the Kuru space as being made of 4 + 1. But once we get to the point where it's just the number keeps showing up, it's tantalizing, but I want to make sure I always understand why. And I don't always understand why. I think with the Pandavas, it might make sense if we think of Yudhishthira as Dharma as the center, and the other 4 brothers as acting kind of like lokalas, or direction protectors, Dishpalas,